T. Hornan, both graduates from the McMaster Master's Program in Communication Management, are presenting today. And without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Jennifer to start us off.
Awesome. So I'm just going to, if you can full screen that, then we're good to go.
Thank you very much for that.
Just that one, yeah.
No, I know. I just actually don't know how to click. There we go.
Oh, there we go. And if we can allow, this should work. So I'm fully wired up here, so you have to bear with me. And this is actually my first conference experience ever, so it's exciting, and I'm a bit nervous too. So thank you so much for the opportunity to present today. So what I'm going to share with you are my capstone findings from last year. I decided to look at lobbying in Canada because there's a lot of academic research out there about government relations and lobbying, but it's mostly done within a European context or a lot of look at the US, and it's very different here in Canada. We have unique rules. So it's actually the first look at lobbying through the lens of public relations. So just quickly wanted to do a scene set. So what is lobbying? Where's the origin of lobbying from? It actually comes from the UK. So members of Parliament and their peers used to hang out in the lobby of Parliament before and after parliamentary debates. So that's where it got its start. And along the way, it has had a bit of a rough ride. So it's long suffered with these allegations of corruption and influence peddling and bribery. And it just kind of like public relations has a really bad reputation. But what it is, it's a stable part of the democratic process. It seeks to inform political decision making. It's an essential communications channel between government and organizations. It's now regulated across several jurisdictions to provide greater transparency, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I'm very shaky, I don't know why. Maybe it's the heels. So in Canada, we have almost 5,200 people who are registered at the federal level to lobby government. And these people are broken down into three designation types. You have consultant lobbyists who are hired by firms to do their work. You have in-house corporate lobbyists, so those are people working for for-profit companies. And you also have in-house organization lobbyists. So for example, at universities, the people that go and talk to government, they would be in-house organization lobbyists, nonprofits. So every year, the Hill Times, which is this weekly publication covering the federal scene, they do this look at the top 100 lobbyists in the country. And some of the common attributes are that these people manage stakeholders, they have strategic and tactical mindsets, and they have excellent interpersonal and communication skills. So sitting amongst a group of public relations professionals, I'm just wondering if any of this sounds familiar to you. So what the theory says, and this is kind of what I used for the foundation of my study. Lester B. Milbrath, who's the father of lobbying research, he said the lobbying process is essentially a communications process, and it's the task of the lobbyist to figure out how to effectively communicate with stakeholders and government policymakers. Baumgartner and Leach, they say that a universal definition of lobbying is actually elusive, and those who are studying the subject rarely use it the same way twice. Newsom et al., they say that some people resist calling lobbying public relations, but it is. And then Verkick and Verkick say that public relations has valuable insights into managing and understanding the lobbying process. This is my only Seinfeld reference because I like Seinfeld, but our worlds colliding, right? So if you look at the practice of lobbying, the world's biggest lobbying firms are actually owned by these transnational communications conglomerates, and they have public relations, marketing, advertising within their corporate structure. So in practice, we're all under the same roof. So after doing my lit review, I discovered that lobbying is communications as public relations, but it's really blurry, and it's blurry for three main reasons, I think. One is the legislation. So in Canada, the Lobbying Act actually doesn't clearly define what lobbying is in a succinct way. It says that you're a lobbyist if you do any number of these activities, but a clear definition is elusive, and it's actually led during the 5-year statutory review in 2012 to have a lot of members of Parliament call on the government to do something about this, because otherwise the rules are too wide open for interpretation. This has also led to some turf wars. So there's more evidence of this happening in the US, but what you have are lobbyists who are deregistering so that they can circumvent the rules, and then they set up shop as communications specialists. So they don't have to follow the rules, and this has angered some people in the public relations community because they don't want those bad lobbyists coming over to their side and taking over. And then you have social media. So are you lobbying if you're orchestrating these huge campaigns online and mobilizing the public so that you can get a win with government? It's very confusing. So this led me to 3 research questions. First, I wanted to find out where lobbying fit within public relations theory and practice. Then I wanted to look at how communications could lend guidance to government relations to strengthen its engagement with its audiences, because we have this great body of research and expertise to draw from. And then I wanted to look at the theme of social media. So how is social media being used in lobbying, and how is it going to change lobbying in the future as they try and continue to change policies? I used a mixed methods approach. I did a survey of federal lobbyists, 35 respondents. I also did in-depth interviews with federally registered lobbyists, 5 from each designation type. And then I also wanted to speak with communications executives, because these people worked for organizations that did have active lobbyists on staff, but they weren't doing the lobbying themselves, but they had to work with them. So I wanted to gain some insight as to what that relationship was like. So we'll go down. These are high-level takeaways from the 3 research questions. To start, I said, how do you describe your role for me as a lobbyist? What do you do? They thought of themselves as a reporter. They reported on issues back to the organization. They were a lawyer. They were advocating on behalf of a client. They were a translator, so they were taking their organization's business stuff and translating it into a language that government would understand. And a lot of these terms, if you think about it, can be used equally for public relations. And then the definition debate, because there's no one real definition. This is really interesting to me. To what extent do lobbyists think that public relations should be included under the definition of lobbying? Only 17% thought that it was a good idea. But then conversely, to what extent do you think lobbying should be included in a PR definition? It jumps to 51%. So not a huge majority, but much higher than them wanting us to be included under their definition. To what extent did these folks collaborate with their public relations peers on government relations efforts? Perhaps not surprisingly, a quite high level of collaboration, and these were the key ones. So issues management, reputation management, media relations. Essentially, they told me that they needed to be working hand in glove. So also, because you don't really go to school to become a lobbyist, you kind of learn it by experience and whatnot, I wanted to know what the 3 key skills were that you needed to be effective lobbying today. Bar none, communications across the board, #1 skill, more than anything else. You also need to have a knowledge of how government works, and you have to be able to think strategically. Research question 2, how can we help them? So first, let's see how lobbyists think they're most effective in dealing with political decision makers. They think that the old way of doing their work is most effective. They're better off meeting with these people one-on-one, writing to them, and picking up the phone. What's not shown here is social media, which only scored 29% for effectiveness, and public relations campaigns, which are 63% effective. Which is interesting when you think of all the public policy debates raging right now in Canada, whether people who are on the ground are being as effective as they could be if they were mobilizing public support. So how does public relations help? To the extent that it generates awareness of an organization and its position, it's of huge value. It saves them time when they're going in to talk to government. If they already know what the company is about, it's a much easier sell. Message alignment, ensuring that what people are saying publicly mirrors what is being said behind closed doors. And creativity, there is so much noise on the Hill. Cabinet ministers, MPs are getting bombarded with requests. So if public relations can come in and think of a new way to not spin, but create an angle or a hook to get their attention, even better. Huge opportunities for public relations to really integrate with GR and help them out in terms of marketing. Some of the lobbyists I talked to, they were drawing on their marketing expertise and applying it to government relations. We have that expertise, we have that savvy, let's move it over. Public opinion, we do research. We do polling, we do focus groups, so let's let them know where the public stands on an issue and share that information a little more broadly. And social media, which I'll get to in the last research question. Huge, huge, huge opportunities here. These people would rather meet than tweet, so we have to help them out. And again, that goes to government relations. But what are some of the risks when you draw upon too much communications when you're trying to affect policy change? For publicly traded companies, they are so afraid of rocking investors' confidence in their products. So if you drum up too much noise about an issue, you don't want to send a wrong signal to the investment community that something is awry. Also, loss of message control. And this is something that we've experienced as public relations practitioners. We've had to let the reins go a bit. These guys are terrified of that. And political sensitivities. They are not convinced that people in public relations have the know-how to decipher what will play out positively or negatively when it comes to government. We just don't have that understanding, according to them. So social media, what are they doing now? So asking these people how they were using social media for government relations efforts, you saw the full range of experience. Some people didn't want to do it, they weren't touching it. Other people were doing it moderately to monitor conversations. And then there were a couple lobbyists I spoke to who had done full-blown campaigns and were quite successful and had government move on an issue because they were mobilizing online networks. But then I was curious, is it because that they just don't know how to use social media? Is that why they're not doing it? But their personal use suggests that they are quite familiar with the platforms. They're just not ready to embrace it in their work. So what are the pros and cons of going the way of online for government relations? Some of the challenges, they would just rather deal directly. If they already have relationships with these people, they'd rather sit down one-on-one. They don't want to be seen to agitate publicly. And there was criticism that those that are using it are only using it to promote themselves and not really engage in two-way dialogue. And at the end of the day, most people suck at it. So overall, it was given a risk factor of 51%. On the flip side, huge opportunities though. They can build consumer loyalty, they can engage stakeholders, they can counter their naysayers, they can go out there and dispel a lot of the mistruths that are being said. And it allows them to target niche audiences. So if you're a shoemaker association, you can go online and find people interested in shoes and get them to help your cause. And it shrinks the huge geography that is Canada at your fingertips. Slightly higher weighting for potential at 56%. So this is my crystal ball, seeing into the future. What are you going to see moving forward in government relations? You're going to see more social media. You're going to see a much faster pace. These people are going to have to respond quicker. We've already seen cabinet ministers deliver public policy decisions on Twitter instead of issuing press releases now. So they're going to have to be there. There's going to be greater transparency. There hopefully will be changes to the legislation because right now it doesn't touch anything online, and this is where it's happening. And then somebody else said, you know what, it's no different than any other communication that comes along. This is the modern version of the letter writing campaign, which I agree with, but I also think it's on steroids. So in conclusion, the definitional challenge continues. I think that collaboration and integration between government relations and public relations is absolutely necessary. Social media is changing not just our practice, theirs, and we have to work together. And we have this expertise. We should share it out. We should strengthen government relations. This is a big opportunity. And at the end of the day, and this is why I'm here to talk to you, there's a huge opportunity for research because there just is none in a Canadian context, especially at the federal level. So that's it. Questions or?
We have literally 2 minutes, but
okay.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. It was very interesting. So we have a couple minutes for questions, and we're encouraging people to please see our presenters after during the break too, if they'd like to follow up in discussion.
Were your GR folks more regulatory or more policy?
More policy. They were the ones that were actually going up on the Hill and meeting with MPs and cabinet ministers.
Now, would you categorize that as the larger share of the GR market in Canada? Would you say most of them are more regulatory, so therefore public servants as opposed to elected officials?
I would say that it's primarily like on the policy side as opposed to regulatory, because these like 5,200 people are registered, and you have to do that if you're going and meeting and trying to influence decisions.
Yeah, but that's if you meet anybody, like anybody from an ADM,
yeah.
EG level.
Right.
So those are more the regulatory guys, right? Like most of the people
Right.
most of the people with the Altstream or Bell or, you know, those are very rarely meeting with elected officials. It's more about CRTC engagement or,
Right.
you know, folks in Industry Canada.
I just think that eventually a lot of that information feeds and makes its way to the top depending on the issue. So I think that they're almost one and the same. They're all in the same pot.
Does anybody teach GR other than us?
Seneca has a program.
Humber, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. That was wonderful.